Well, good morning. And thank you for those kind words, Glenn. That was, you never want to stand up after an introduction, do you? So, some of the thoughts that Claudette shared earlier really leads into exactly what I wanted to do today. You mentioned about it's important that you learn your lessons here, leadership lessons here. And I just decided today that what I wanted to do was just share some leadership lessons. I've actually got about 33. I brought 10 today to dip into. I'll probably cover 4 or 5 because I kind of go off on one a little bit once I get excited. And so my heart really is just to talk about some of the things from my past, or my and Sue, my wife's past, over the last 35 years. And it incorporates, I think it's important to say, it incorporates a lot of different roles. That from starting as a youth pastor in the church where I was doing a secular job as a motor vehicle mechanic for what is now BT, British Telecommunications, and then being an assistant pastor, then coming here in 79 to 81, then leaving here and being an assistant in the church for 8 years, then taking on the work in Bolton as the leader for last 22 years, and then just recently handing that over to someone else. So now I'm kind of working under him. So I was the leader, now I'm working under the leader. At the same time as I was the leader, I was the assistant leader to the national leader of Assemblies of God, and prior to that I was the assistant to the missions leader of Assemblies of God. So in that mix, I've been in the position of being the leader and working under the leader and being part of a team. And I think until you've done all those things, it's really there where tensions are worked through and paradoxes are worked out. And so it's just out of that heart, not coming here as an expert in any way at all, simply still learning many, many lessons every day. Learned loads since we've been here working on site here at Mattersey. So it's a great privilege to be here. Your principal says he wants this place to be a place that's producing the next generation of Christian leaders. And so I just thought it was great to talk about some lessons of leadership and hope that you just take some things from this that would help you. Take what you will, don't take what you don't want to take, it's fine. They're just my thoughts and comments and my opinions on certain things. I'm going to talk about a lot of different Bible passages today, so I've not got one particular to dip into because I'm going to be shooting all over the place, but I want to hang everything I say today simply on a beautiful verse in Philippians chapter 1, verse 6. And it says, being confident of this, he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion. Do you believe that? It's important. Bit crazy sitting here if you don't believe that. But be confident of this. He who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion. That certainly speaks to me about a journey that we're on. What he has began it is going to bring it to completion. And so the first thing I just wanted to talk about today was simply this. On your journey, you can park up anywhere you like. And so, sometimes you're going through some of the things Claudette shared, some of those awful situations she's been through, that can cause you to suddenly, like she said, I stopped going to church. I thought this isn't working. I'm questioning God and all those kind of things. And if we can just compare it to the children of Israel, who initially they were in that place of slavery. But for some people, it actually probably suited them because at least they knew they got some food. At least they knew they had some kind of shelter. And sometimes we can be today, even in Christian leadership, in a place of slavery. Slavery to people, slavery to people's opinions, slavery to intimidation, slavery to what people think about us. But God wants us to move out of that into what was then in the desert place, was a place of sufficiency. So, we can be a leader in a place of sufficiency. And in that place, in the desert, it was quite amazing because their shoes never ran out. They always had food, so there would be no such thing as Asda or Tesco or anything like that. Shoe wouldn't operate and Timpson's wouldn't operate because you didn't need shoes. You could be walking around and say, I've had these shoes on for 25 years. They never wore out. Isn't it amazing? And you can live in a place, and even as a Christian leader, you can think, well, it's okay here. It's sufficient. I can get by. God's providing. But, there was two spies that actually said, there's more than this. There's more than this. There's a place of surplus. But sometimes to get from the place of sufficiency to the place of surplus means some battles. And that's why it's easier sometimes to stick in the place of sufficiency, because the tougher battles are when you're going for the surplus. And so he said, there are grapes, great grapes, but there are fortified cities. Yes, there is milk and honey, but there are giants. And so you can decide on your journey where you're going to park up. And I trust for all of us, we'll come to the point where we want to live in that place of surplus. Okay, so that's the first thing. And I rush through these because there's so many. The second is this. On your Christian journey, on your leadership journey, never stop learning. Now, obviously, in a place of academia like this, of course, we should all be lifelong learners. We believe that. I'm sure that's what you all believe. But I'm talking more from the concept of learning from your Christian experiences, learn from leadership experiences, learning from others, learning so that we're always making progress and not making the same mistakes. I've got this little, it's very old, this concept, but it does help me even today to kind of develop and to continue to learn through processes, especially when you're leading church, especially when you're bringing vision, especially when you're the visionary in a place, and you've got to keep pushing through to new levels. So this was something that was done before, so I don't have to draw squares, but simply just this concept. If you've seen it before, don't worry, you can learn from it. A lot of the places we operate in, especially as leaders, is that we've been doing stuff the same for quite a while. Now, please don't take offense at that. That's how most places work. So what we do is we think old and we do old. Even in how we lead church, even how we run church, we get in a pattern of doing things. We become predictable in what we do. We serve the most creative God, and sometimes we can be completely the opposite to being creative. So we think old and do old. But sometimes you might be at some conference, you might hear some ministry, you might be involved in something here, and you start to think new. Okay, so now you try to make this journey whereby you think new. And so you've got ideas and you try to implement them, but the problem is when you try and implement your new ideas, you get pushback, you get issues, you get hassle, you get problems. And so you live in this frustrated place where you're thinking new, but you do old. And so there's nothing worse than that, because in your head you're wanting to do something, but you can't actually do it because you've got all the hassles with people, you've got all the problems, you've got all the issues of bringing change. And so the problem is sometimes we just default back, and we go back that way because it's a lot easier to live here than it is to live here. But if we're going to be real great visionary leaders, and visionary leaders actually means that you have to let people see what you see. You see, it's all right talking about being a leader, but if you're not going somewhere, if you're not saying to the people, this is what I can see and this is where I want to take you, then really you're not leading anything. The biggest pressure you've got as a leader is the visionary concept, the constant visionary concept. So that what you've got to do is say, right, I'm going to push through this way, so you eventually, forgive my writing, you think new and you do new. So that's a massive achievement, isn't it? Because you've kind of... Now, the problem is, before too long, sometimes months, sometimes years, before too long, we've come back here. And you think, wow. And then you're thinking, I'm just going around in circles. Dear me, I've been here before. Well, you have. But it's important that when you think about them circles, if you can see that circle as a helix, okay? So all the time, you might not realize it because you're thinking, oh, I've been here before. But actually you have, but at a different level. And so what once was a problem here, so maybe let me just give you an illustration here. That 1991, we had to build a new building in Bolton, going to cost £400,000. I'd never done anything like that. I'd never led a church. I'd never raised money. I'd never done anything. £400,000. And eventually we did it. We paid for it. It was done. 2005, we had to redevelop it, but this time was buying some other property and also costing twice as much just to revamp the building. So now, this was 1.6 million. Now, I'm facing the same view out there of faith, what was needed. Same view looking out that way, but 400,000 was here, 1.6 million was here. So what you've done is you've actually climbed in that cycle so that you're seeing further and better. Another illustration is intimidation. When I first was at Burnley, after coming out of this college here, and I went as an assistant to this guy that was working there, and there was about 120 people. And I remember he used to preach, and there was a lady who didn't particularly like us for some reason. I don't know the reason, but I sat in the front row, and every time I'm preaching, she's doing this. You know that with your leaf, you're making the noise with your pages. I can't do it now, but it was dead loud when she was doing it. And I remember thinking, I was looking at these people, and I was intimidated by this one act. And it was, you forgot about the other people. You was wound up, and your focus was on this, and you couldn't kind of be free in what you was doing. And so that was 2000, I don't know, no, 19, I forgot, it was a long time ago. But, you know, if that happened today, I'd just clock around the head and say, yeah, you're distracting all the people behind you. You know, but there are now other levels of intimidation when you reach into new areas and new concepts and new people and new organizations. And so we're always trying to climb that spiral, but it's important that we realize as long as we realize that we're climbing. So a quick illustration, a number of years ago, I was traveling to a friend of mine's house near Manchester Airport, and on the way, I kind of got stuck between two lorries in the wrong lane. And you know what it's like, you can't get out. And so I got taken off the actual road I wanted to be on. I got sucked off the road really by these trucks going down this other road. So I'm thinking, I've got to get to a roundabout, turn back, and so in my head I'm trying to think how I get back. But there was no roundabout, it was a left turn, and then eventually I'm completely lost. So I have to phone him up and ask how we get to his house. 2 weeks later, I was flying out to Bulgaria on a missions trip, and as we flew out of Manchester Airport and began to climb, I could actually see where I got lost. And it was like, as you kind of look down, it was so easy from an aerial view to see where you got lost. But actually, when I was getting lost, all I could see was trucks. You don't see what's on the other side of you. So even when you're presenting your vision, when you're doing stuff at leadership level, don't get so paranoid about people who don't always grasp what you're saying, because sometimes you've seen what they haven't yet seen. So a lot of leaders can be very controlling of people. They can be very harsh on people. And actually, the people are thinking, I can't see it yet. And your journey is always to climb higher. So you can say, I've seen it, and I want to take you to where I've seen. And so it's this learning process through all our life. So just that little simple principle helps you. Just get a drink of water because I've dried up. The third thing we'll talk about, that was never stop learning. Sorry, I'm talking into the waters. Never stop learning. Thirdly, take risk with people. Take risk with people. I would not be stood here if a pastor called Terry Hanford hadn't seen a concept, a spark of potential, and done something with it. And I can remember that era. So quite a few things I'll talk about today around the era of coming here and just moving on from here, then because it kind of, the 33 kind of build over the years. So I'm trying to make it relevant to the situation here. And I remember I was a youth leader in the church, but I was a very nervous person. I was okay with people, but would never stand behind a mic. In fact, I didn't get baptized in water for years, simply because you had to say a few words in a microphone. And then one day I started going out with a young lady, and after 3 months she became a Christian. She was getting baptized, so I was shamed into being baptized, because I thought, if she's doing it, I've got to do it. But so it was all this about being behind a mic. But anyway, he says to us, one Sunday, I want to preach on a Sunday night. So I was panicking, and I just got this angle about the writing on the wall and Belshazzar and the writing on the wall. And I got this angle, and I'm getting all excited about it. And I thought I got 20 minutes, and I got my notes prepared. Don't forget, this point in time, I'm a motor vehicle mechanic. It's my secular job. But I'm having a go. So on Sunday, I stand up, and as I look at the notes, they just all go blurred. And my mind goes blank. And the people are all just looking like the stone. And I battled through for about 10 minutes, and after about 10 minutes, he came and stood up next to me, and then I got the grasp of what I was saying, flowed into the preach, finished what I was trying to say, made an appeal. Some people made a commitment to Christ, and then he made out how wonderful it was. I got down off the stage, and one of the guys who was an elder in the church, he said this to me. He said, Ian, don't give up your day job. Well, I felt bad enough without that, but he's saying stick to cars and forget preaching. And so I've never felt so bad in all my life. But the difference here was, you see, there was one guy who saw a spark of potential and took a risk. And if you don't take risks with people, you know, you'll never get anywhere. You've got to take, now sometimes they go wrong. Sometimes you make mistakes, sometimes you make the wrong judgments, but you've got to take risks with people. Some of you are only here because someone took a risk with you. And certainly that applies to me. So that's quite a simple one, quite an easy one. Take risks with people. Eileen Gooder, a lady, said this about risk. She said, you can stay in your house all day to avoid any accidents, infections, or hassles. You can drink a cup of hot milk and go to bed early in order to get plenty of sleep. You can eat all the right foods in order to remain healthy and extend your life. You can stay out of the sun to avoid its harmful rays. You can take out multiple insurance policies to cover every eventuality in life. But you can still slip in the bath and break your neck and it'd serve you right. She was a good pastor, but you've got to take some risks. And faith actually is about risk. Number 4, learn to burn bridges. Learn to burn bridges. I really enjoyed the work that I did as a motor vehicle mechanic for 11 years. I'd got to a position where there was good promotions ahead, and I just felt I needed to come here. And it was a massive move to actually hand in the resignation. But I'm quite a cautious person, so I'm always the one who likes a plan B. So even when sat-navs came out, I still had the map next to me with a route written down, never convinced that this woman on this sat-nav that sits in this box is going to get me to where I wanted to go. So I was always a bit that kind of person who drove so daft living at these two angles. But even coming here, I wanted to keep doors open in case, when I finished, nobody wanted me. In case when I finished here, there was nowhere to go. In case when I finished here, horror of horrors, then, I'm not saying this applies now, it was a ridiculous thought, then if you went back to your own church, you were a failure. That's what I'm talking about 79 now, but that's exactly as it was. So I would, during the holiday period, I would used to go back to the GPO as it was then, and I'd always make out I was just like I was going to see my mates. And I was, in a sense, but I'd also say, are there still any jobs going here? And so you was always just thinking, if it doesn't work out, there's a plan B. And God doesn't want us to work with plan B. He says a plan for your life. And he doesn't want you to live in this aspect of, I've got to keep all these back doors open just in case. When Elisha was going to follow Elijah, what he did, he broke up the plough, and he killed the oxen, and he sacrificed the oxen with the plough. And what he was actually saying is, I'm putting my livelihood behind me, I'm burning it because I'm only going one way, and that's with Elijah, and that's to be his successor. And so we've got to learn that sometimes, it's so easy to think we've got to have a plan B, we've got to have another route where to go. And God doesn't work like that. He actually works with us like a sat-nav. The sat-nav only tells you the next bit of the journey. It doesn't say, right, you're going to go here, and then you'll arrive in London. It just tells you the next part of your journey. So in 1 Kings 17, Elijah, the Tishbite, arrives on the scene. Nobody's heard of him. And God says, I want you to go to Ahab and tell him that there's going to be no rain except by my word. This is the most powerful man in the land. Now, if I was Elijah and God said that to me, I would always say this at the end, then what? Because I want to know there's an exit from Ahab. But he doesn't say that. He says, go and tell him this. And then it says that when he tells him this, he says, then the word of the Lord came to Elijah, and he says, go to Cherith, and there, drink of the water, and the ravens will feed you. But in my head, I'd be thinking, yeah, but if there's a drought, the water's going to dry up, then what? But God didn't tell him. And then when the water did dry up, it came to the point where the water dried up, God came to him and he said, go to Zarephath, because there's a widow there, and she's just going to cook a last meal for her and her son and die. And I want you to go and nick it. I want you to go and I want you to have it. And I'd be thinking, yeah, but then what? What do I do? And all the way through Elijah's history, you see that it was always the next step, the next stage. And there was never a plan B. There was never another route. And we have to learn to live believing that God has got us right in the palm of his hand, and the next step is all you need to know at this point in time. Now, that is frustrating at times. That's frustrating when you're here, because most people say to you, what are you going to do when you leave? And you get fed up of answering the question. Well, I don't know. I'm in God's hands. And it's not about making plan Bs. It's about burning. There were armies, there were soldiers, there were people where they got off the boats and they burnt the boats so they couldn't go back. They could only go forward and fight. They burnt bridges, they cut bridges so they couldn't go back. They could only go forward and fight. We've got to learn to burn bridges. And then number 5, this was a very important lesson that I learned. Shattered dreams aren't always what they seem to be. Maybe for you, Claudette, you found some of that. Shattered dreams weren't always what they seem to be. I'll give you a bit more of an illustration here. And then I'll come to the Bible bit which explains what I'm saying. Horror of horrors, when I finished the 2 years here, I think I was only one of 2 students that nobody wanted. and they went back to their own church. So I went back to my own church. And when I got there, people were doing stuff I used to do, but doing it better. And it's like there was no fit. It's like, and someone said to me, this same person that told me, the same person that said, don't give up your day job, said, if you want to know how much you missed when you leave a church, put your fist in a bucket full of water. When you pull it out, the hole that's left is how much you missed. He's a real good confidence builder, this chappie. And I'm thinking, because he knew the dilemma he was going through here. So I finished college. Me and Sue were about to get married. Well, left it in June, July, and we're going to get married in February the next year. And so I'd cashed all the money in, as Claudette said before. There was no grants or anything like that. You just paid for everything. And so I left owing a little bit of money. So I owed a bit of money. I was going to get married in a few months' time. And so all I can do is try and find a job. But I'm pretty despondent now because everything I'd hoped for, the dreams I had of ministry and doing whatever, had all evaporated. I'm back now in a church where I didn't feel like I fitted. I didn't want to be there. And now I have to get these jobs. So I get this first job, temporary job for 3 months, unloading sacks of peanuts off articulated lorries that have come from China for some peanut butter. So as I'm unloading these sacks onto these pallets, you had to build them so they're about this high. I'm mad at God. And I've got a shattered dream. And I'm unloading peanuts and in my mind thinking, God, what are you doing? The plan was ministry. I had a job I loved. I cashed my pension in to go to Bible college. I'm telling God all these things, which he knew anyway, but I'm telling him all this stuff, kind of mad at God inside. And so I continue this for 3 months. The next 3 months, I've got this job cleaning toilets at Spring Garden Post Office in Piccadilly, Manchester. And as I'm cleaning the toilets, I'm mad at God. I'm saying, God, what's this about? You know, I left something I liked. I cashed this, and I've got no money now. We're getting married in a few months. I've got nowhere to go, nowhere to stay, nowhere to live. You know, you pour your heart out. And can you follow my accent? Oh, so then the next one, there's another 3 months was working as a porter in the health service, taking pens and pads around all the offices and that kind of thing. And I remember feeling so sorry for myself. And then I got to the point one day where I was just reading Romans 15. And it's the passage where Paul talks to the people in Rome as he's finishing, I think it's his last missionary journey, and he's taken an offering that he's taken, he's going to take it back to Jerusalem, and then he says, and then I'm going to go to Spain. You don't hear people preach about this a lot, but he had a desire to go to Spain. He had a desire to go where no one else had been to preach the gospel. He didn't want to build another man's foundation. His heart was set on Spain. So he says to his friends in Rome, I'm going to pop in on you on my way to Spain. But then we know the history because he goes back, he gets arrested, he has this Felix, Festus, all the other characters that he has to see, he appeals to Caesar, and he ends up having to go to Rome. On the way to Rome, there's a shipwreck. Eventually, he ends up in house arrest. And you read about the last few years of his life whereby he always had a guard in his house and there were certain people that he was able to preach to. But what we have to understand is that in that time of house arrest, I wonder if Paul was thinking about a shattered dream, of getting to Spain, of doing what his heart really wanted to do. And now he's just in a house, under house arrest, some guard watching him all day long. But you know, as he was doing this, he was actually writing what we believe, you're being taught here, I'm sure, were 4 prison epistles. He was writing Colossians, Ephesians, Philemon, and Philippians. And the words he was writing in that house, when his dreams might have been Spain, were going to go to all the continents of the world. They were going to be written in thousands of languages. They were going to reach lots of people far beyond Spain. And we have to understand that quite often what our plans are, God has got greater plans for us. Sometimes when we think this is what we want to do, God's saying, I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it greater, but you don't realize I'm doing it greater. You know, people say God sometimes is doing more behind our back than in front of our face, and we don't see it. But he's doing something. And so when all Paul could do by telescope was possibly see Spain, God knew that there were continents right across this globe, but one day these words that he was writing would go to. So he would do far more. He would achieve far more than Spain. He would achieve world. You know, God knew that when he couldn't travel to those distances, one day there's going to be a jumbo jet that takes you from one part of the world to the other side of the world in 24 hours. God knew, but Paul didn't. And so we have to understand that when we're actually feeling sometimes our dreams are broken, our dreams are shattered, that's not always the case. God is doing something that we don't fully understand ourselves because he wants to do greater than we can ever ask or think. When you read about Joseph, I noticed that in the story from where he's thrown in the pit to the great success at the end, there's about 5 times in the Bible it says this, but the Lord was with Joseph. Now you try telling Joseph that the Lord was with him when he was in the pit, but he was. You try telling Joseph that the Lord was with him when he was thrown in prison for actually doing the right thing and running away from a woman when she tried to seduce him. He did the right thing and ended up in prison. And you try telling him the Lord was with him, but the Lord was with him. And we have to understand in all them circumstances, the Lord is with us. Be confident of this. Who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion. Number 6, and we might end with this one because it'll probably take me 10 minutes to get through this because it's quite a lengthy one. Probably the biggest lesson I learned here was the need to get your own ministry. Now, what do I mean by that? If we don't get our own ministry, if we don't get something ourselves from God, then we end up going down 4 different tracks with our lives that get us in a mess. And the first one is if you don't get your own ministry, you end up often trying to borrow one. So, the first week I was here, second week, I was here, it just so happened that you got linked up with 2 other people to kind of go around singing in churches. So there were 3 of us used to go, a guy called Reuben and a girl called Debbie. And because you were actually going to these churches, sometimes they'd ask you to preach. So quite a lot of weekends you were preaching in different churches at that time. Now, I've just told you my previous attempt at preaching. That was the last time I preached before I came here. And so I got asked to preach at, actually it was Langold. One of the first church I preached was Langold. And I thought, what am I going to do? So I spent a full week listening to a cassette of someone else preaching to learn it off by heart so that when it came to Langold, I could preach something that I'd not done myself. Now, I'm not talking about just listening to ministry to get ideas or reading books to get ideas or going on the internet to get ideas. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about actually nicking stuff. Proper stealing and then taking the credit for it. So because you were going to different churches through the 2 years you was here, I actually preached quite a lot of times, but I only ever preached 3 things because they didn't know you was in different places and didn't know what you preached. So, and all of them were nicked. They were totally nicked. And what's the word you use? Played in its worst extreme. And so eventually when we finished, and to jump from where I was before, when we were getting married and all that kind of stuff, we ended up going to a place called Burnley, and as an assistant to a guy there. So he said to me, right, what we're going to do is Sunday morning you preach, Sunday night I'll preach, the next week vice versa, the next week vice versa. He was very generous with his pulpit. But in my heart and my head, I'm thinking, what do I do after 3 weeks? What do I do after 3 weeks? Then 3 weeks came, 3 weeks went, 3 weeks came, and I was in this predicament now that I've run out of tapes. This was cassette tapes, by the way. You know, you've got to stick with me with history. So for the next year, this is no kid, for the next year, I spent my life listening to tapes of other people preach, just to learn, to get it in my head. And so on my day off, I'm listening. In bed at night, I'm listening. Kissing my wife, I'm listening to someone preaching, you know, all this time, because it became a paranoia. I've got to get something out. And the trouble was, you could listen to 10, to get one good preach, you've got to listen to 10, because some of them were no good anyway. They'd nicked them probably. And so that was my dilemma that I was in. And then one day, I got so frustrated with this whole thing of living a lie, that every Sunday they used to have communion, and they always started off by saying this verse, but it hit me from nothing to do with communion. It just hit me as a principle. Paul said, "That which I receive from the Lord, I give to you." And something broke. That which I receive from the Lord, I give to you. My history had been that which I received from a cassette tape nicked from somebody else, I give to you. Today it might be that which I received from the internet, I give to you. That which I received from I give to you. Now they're all fine as sources. But if you're talking about genuinely leading people, you've got to start with that which I receive from the Lord, I give to you. Because that's the only thing that will keep, that's the only thing that will last, that will the only thing, because you'll get found out. And you know, I did probably on a number of occasions. So that was very important, that you don't live on a borrowed ministry. The story is told of that awful sleazeball of a servant called Gehazi. And this child's dead, and he knows the secret of Elisha's success. He always had his staff, and he takes the staff of Elisha and he runs on ahead and lays it on the boy, and nothing happens. But it takes the man of God with the real goods to come, Elisha himself, to raise the boy from the dead. He borrowed the staff, it wouldn't work. You can't live off a borrowed ministry. But if you don't buy it, if you don't borrow it, you can buy it in a sense. You know, there's lots of things you can buy that can give you a bit of a false ministry. So the apostles and this guy Simon the sorcerer came and said, how much shall I give you so I can do what you've done? Because they saw the miracles, they saw the great stuff they were doing. And they said, may your money perish with you because you thought you could buy the gift of God. You can't borrow it. Jesus borrowed tons of stuff. He borrowed a womb, he borrowed a tomb, he borrowed a donkey, he borrowed loads of stuff, but he had a ministry. So you can borrow it, you can buy it. If you don't do that, then often you end up living in a place of pretense if you haven't got your own ministry. I was brought up in a place, in a home of pretense. We were brought up in the Church of the Nazarene. My dad was very prominent in the church there, but he left us a number of times as children, probably 5 times for different women, but my mum would always have him back. And I just grew up with this concept that this is what you do. This is the life. This is what they're this in church, but you're this out of church, and that was so. A learned behaviour is a bit of a principle there, and so I grew up. When I became a Christian, it was a bit of a pretence. You knew the show, you knew what to say, you knew what to say to leaders, you knew where to sit, you knew how to behave, and all that kind of stuff. And quite often, I've said to the people in our church, quite often I was sat there on the back row, and the only reason I was there on a Sunday night because I was sat next to a girl called Susan Eyre that used to take us around the back of the church and taught us how to kiss. That was about, but it looked right. I mean, church looked right, but my motive for being there, Sue said she didn't do a very good job as well. But that was my motive a lot of the time when I was at church, and it was a pretense. But I was brought up with that. I found out that my dad, he used to disappear on a Tuesday night. Said he was a chauffeur. Said he was taking the boss somewhere. Found out he's the worshipful master of the Masons. Got all the regalia, and that was his life. So that was all going on while he was a key in the church. So I grew up with all that, and it became part of my existence and part of my behaviour. And then I've realised, you can't dress up death. You can try. Well, you do dress up death, but you can't get away with it. I think Christ said to one of the churches, you've got a reputation of being alive, but you are dead. During the time of being a motor mechanic, I worked a part-time job on a Saturday, so I started to drive funeral cars. The very first funeral that I was involved with, I thought I was just driving the car, but they said, no, we want you to get used to death. And so they said, quite often, when someone has died, they leave the jewellery on, especially a lady, until they're going to finally fix the lid and then take the jewellery off and give it to the family. And they said this one, a lady called Rose Gervish from Gorton, Manchester, 70 years old, she died. And they said, we want you to take the jewellery off and give it to the family. And I said, I thought, I'd never seen it. I was only 17. I'd never seen a person dead. So I was expecting this horrific sight. When they took the lid off, she looked wonderful. They'd done her up beautiful. Her skin was gorgeous, a lovely colour, rouge on her face, hair done beautiful. She looked really, really, really nice. I couldn't believe that I couldn't stick a pin in her and she wouldn't jump up. I couldn't believe she'd never breathe again. She looked so lifelike. So as the years went on, the months went on, they started to use me more in how they prepare the body. And I began to realise that when they came in, when you saw them at that day, they were very different than when they came in. And I came to an understanding that they had an amazing ability to dress up death. And we can dress it up, we can cover it, we can hide, we can pretend, but we'll always get found out. And if we don't have our own ministry, then we tend to live in a place of pretense. And then I finish with this part of it, and then I've done for today. If you don't get your own ministry, the danger is that you begin to live in the past. You begin to call on things that you did before. You begin to always refer to issues in the past because you've got nothing in the now. What got you to where you are won't get you to where you need to go. That's a very, very important thing because things change so much. And one of probably the saddest, powerful, hurtful verses that I've ever come across in the Bible is the one where Samson is, if you read about him, 5 times it says, when the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, he did this. When the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, he did that. Then suddenly, the language changes. Even though he's lifting the gates off the walls, he's been with a prostitute, and he's still lifting the gates off the walls. But no, don't mention the Spirit of the Lord anymore. Then the next we see him in this cat and mouse game with Delilah. And he plays this game with her, about the secret of his strength. And then eventually he tells her the truth. And this is what he says. She wakes him. She said, the Philistines are on you. And this is what the Bible says. He said, I will just get up and do what I did before. Going back to the past. What I did before. But then it says, this is the verse. But he did not know that the Lord had left him. Now, you can argue with me all day with your theology and your doctrine about what God can do and can't do, what can lose and can't lose. And this guy woke up without something he went to sleep with. He did not know that the Lord had left him. And I found that very, 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 very powerful. To think that when he's grinding corn blind, walking in circles, he must have been thinking, how on earth did I get to this place? How on earth did I end up here? I used to be doing all this great stuff when the Spirit of the Lord came upon me. He came to the point probably where what once was a privilege, he expected as a right. Today, to speak to anyone is always a privilege, but sometimes people think it's a right. And we can change very quickly from privilege to right. A few years ago, I had a great opportunity to go to the Edge conference in Australia. And someone had told me about the extravagant hospitality. And I kind of only half believed it, but when I got there, 3 things happened. And again, I say I'll close with this. 3 things happened. The first thing is you got out of the car. Oh, no, they said to you, when you get to your hotel, there'll be a limousine car comes and picks you up every day and takes you to the hotel. So you got your own chauffeur and limousine. You get out of the car, they've got a red carpet walking into the church, and guys in your face with a camera, saying, you're at some of these award ceremonies, and saying, what do you think of the conference, so you're a bit like this because you're embarrassed. Then you get in, they say, no, this is your server for the week, and they will sit you down for your meals, and they will take you there, do this, do the other. And at first I thought this is quite pretentious. After 2 days, I began to enjoy it. I'd never had a chauffeur before, I've never had a server before, I'd never had a red carpet before. And it's funny how quickly that you begin to think, they don't do this for me in Bolton. Maybe they should. But maybe I should drop a few hints when I get home. I quite like this. But then, I wasn't long home before Sue said, it's your turn to put the bin out. Don't forget to clean the toilet. And very quickly, but you know what was a privilege, very quickly can become an expectation. And that was where Samson found himself, from this place of doing great things for God. But now he finds himself in this awful place where the Lord had left him. Even in his death, I believe the Bible. Of course I believe the Bible. He said he killed more in his death than he did in his life. But I don't think it was a happy ending. I would have preferred it that all the boulders came down and he still lived, but it wasn't quite the same. But it says that, he says, may I die with the Philistines? The problem was he took too long to die. He should have died a lot sooner to himself. So I finished. I've done 6 of 33. And 6 of the 10 for today. But be confident of this. He that began a good work in you, and you, and you, and you, and all of you, will carry it on to completion. It's a great journey. There's loads to learn, and I just trust some of the things I've thrown out today would help you in different ways. Okay, thank you.